Secretary General, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much.
Let's begin with the broader picture. We have been hearing here that the world is becoming an increasingly unstable place. Would you agree with that?
We see at least a more unpredictable world with more uncertainties, but when we have more unpredictability, then the best answer is stronger international institutions like NATO, like the UN, like EU, because partly they help us to reduce uncertainties, and partly institutions like NATO also help us to address and to cope with surprises, crises when they occur. So the best answer to a more uncertain world is to strengthen our international cooperation.
But they are under attack, so to say. We see here also the debate is how the international order is under the attack, that we need new ways of dealing with the reality, the new reality. And even Ms. Merkel said yesterday that there are some spaces to reform international organizations.
I'm a strong believer in strong international institutions, but that's exactly why I also strongly support efforts to modernize and adapt them. Because if we are not able to modernize and adapt international institutions, then they will not serve their purpose, then they will not be functional. So the stronger you believe in international institutions, the more you should be in favor of modernizing them. And that's exactly what we have done with NATO. We have implemented the biggest adaptation of NATO since the end of the Cold War, increased the readiness of our forces, reformed the command structure, and we also see that we have now deployed forces in the eastern part of the alliance for the first time in our history. So international institutions can only survive if they adapt, change, modernize.
Let's switch to more local perspective. How would you assess the security situation in the Western Balkans? What are the threats, if there are any?
So we see, I always call it a mixed picture. We see some problems becoming more serious, but we also see some progress. Again, from a NATO perspective, it is a great achievement that Montenegro joined NATO last year and became our 29th member. That helped to, it's good for Montenegro, it's good for the region, it's good for NATO. And we have seen that, for instance, investments from NATO allies have doubled into Montenegro after Montenegro joined. The former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia is now really moving towards membership.
With the name dispute resolved?
The name dispute will hopefully, at least we have an agreement on the table. It is now ratified by the parliament in Skopje, and we expect it to be ratified by the parliament in Athens very shortly.
But what about Serbia and its relationship to Russia? We have seen Mr. Putin visited Serbia lately, and Serbia has received huge donations when it comes to military, especially when it comes to military warplanes. Is it an issue for NATO?
So we respect the neutrality of Serbia. Serbia is a partner. I visited Serbia just a couple of months ago. And then NATO conducted the biggest civil preparedness exercise ever in Serbia. So we work together with Serbia on many different issues.
Do you see Serbia soon as a member state, or is it in perspective?
But Serbia is not aspiring for NATO membership, and we totally respect that. That's a national sovereign decision.
Would you like it to be a member state?
No, because I think I would only like members who will actually want to become member. But as we respect the neutrality and the decisions of Serbia, of course Russia should also respect, for instance, the decisions of Skopje and of Montenegro to become members. So it's a sovereign decision of any nation to decide whether they want to become a member of the alliance or not. And we respect them when they want to join, and we respect them when they don't want to join. That's a national decision of each and every nation.
There's a border dispute between Serbia and Croatia and the Danube when it comes to several territorial pieces of land. Could it be an issue for NATO as well?
I really encourage you to find the countries to find a bilateral solution to that. It's not something that has been discussed within the NATO framework.
Let's just shortly look at Bosnia. There are some concerns, not only concerning Bosnia, but also other countries from the region, that there are fighters going to the Middle East, fighting for radical Islam and then coming back to the region. Is that threat real?
The return of foreign fighters is a real concern, and NATO is part of the global coalition to defeat ISIS. And we are now very focused on how should we deal with the number of foreign fighters that returns to Europe and to NATO allied countries.
Do you have any real figures when it comes to Bosnia, Macedonia, Montenegro?
I'm careful about sharing figures, because this is also part about intelligence. But what we do is that we share intelligence. We make sure that all allies are doing whatever they can to track these people and hold them accountable for what they have done being part of ISIS.
There are some internal, well, let's say, instabilities in Bosnia. Is that an issue for NATO? Do you monitor the situation?
At the end of the day, this has to be solved by the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina themselves. But of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a close partner of NATO, and we have just decided now to take one step further in our partnership by saying that we accept the submission of their annual national plans for reform. So we will continue to work with Bosnia and Herzegovina to modernize, to implement reforms, to modernize the defense and security institutions, including fighting corruption. And for us, it is important to be present in Bosnia, because NATO has a history in this part of Europe. We helped to end the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we have still a presence there, and we will continue to work with the whole Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Should the situation in Bosnia further complicate with the Republic of Srpska and the rest of the Bosnia, can the High Representative for Bosnia expect full support from NATO? Should he implement any way of force at all in that situation?
Again, I will not now speculate, because that they will only add to uncertainty. What we will do is to strengthen our partnership, continue to provide political support, practical support, and help to modernize and strengthen the defense and security institutions of Bosnia.
Okay, and finally, let's get back to Croatia. Croatia has failed lately in several last weeks to get new modern fleet of F-16 jets from Israel. Would you maybe prefer that Croatia decided to go with some planes that were basically compatible with NATO standards?
So what NATO does...
Were you surprised by the whole situation?
What NATO does is that we identify specific capabilities which we then ask different nations to provide. And we have what we call the NATO defense planning process, where we actually allocate different capabilities to different nations. And I expect Croatia to follow up and to acquire the different capabilities we have agreed according to the NATO defense planning
Was
process.
NATO in any way included in these negotiations between Croatia and other members?
No, that's a bilateral issue, and that's the way we make these decisions in NATO. NATO as an alliance agree on the overall capability targets for each and every ally, including Croatia, and then it's for the individual allies to in a way follow up and to make the investment decisions and decide exactly from who they buy the different types of capabilities.
So my last question, were you surprised by the decision of the United States not to allow Croatia or Israel to sell these planes to Croatia?
Again, this is not an issue that has been on the NATO table, so this is an issue to be solved by those nations involved.
Mr. General Secretary, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much for having me.